Way to go, Tic Tac!
That's how you punch.
Wakanda forever!
You wouldn't have heard of me.
Let me put you on hold.
Dance off, bro! He's a friend from work!
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
What up, guys? It's Dom, and welcome back to another movie review. Today we are going over and ranking Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Released in 2005, written and directed by Steve Box and Nick Park, Wallace and his loyal dog, Gromit, set out to discover the mystery behind the garden sabotage that plagues their village and threatens the annual giant vegetable growing contest. Now, I watched this movie as a kid and I loved it. I remember it very well. Watching it as an adult, though, obviously it's not targeted towards me currently. So I got to see it in kind of a different point of view, and I did appreciate the claymation more now than as a kid. I actually noticed it a lot more, and I thought it was interesting. But the story, it was good. It just wasn't obviously directed towards adults. It was definitely directed towards kids. But overall, still pretty good. And also I wanted to say before we start off this video, yes, I know I haven't uploaded in a very long time. Obviously with Christmas and everything in the past week going on, it was hard to find time. Plus now I'm kind of sick, so it's harder to talk. So I pushed it off as long as I could, but I think it's about time I get back to it. So without further ado, let's get right into the 10 essential aspects of a movie. The first essential aspect is plot. Now, I thought the plot of this movie was kind of interesting. I mean, the mystery part of the movie that happened towards the end. Obviously, I love mysteries. If you've seen my other reviews, like Thanksgiving, for example, that's a mystery movie. I loved it due to that fact. Obviously, as a kid, I've watched this movie before, so I don't have the luxury of trying to figure out who it is because I already knew who it was. But when I put myself into that kind of point of view of being a fresh viewer to this movie, I did actually think that they did a good job of deceiving the audience to make it a better experience of trying to figure out who it is. So that part they did well. Otherwise, I think the whole scenario of why they were in that situation definitely is more targeted towards kids. I mean, it's literally a dog and his owner that are, their main occupation is saving people's gardens that are being attacked by rabbits or who knows what kind of pests. But literally, because in this town, the most important thing is vegetables. The most important thing is vegetables, and every year they have a biggest vegetable contest. Whoever can grow the biggest vegetable. So I think that itself isn't as targeted towards adults as I would think so. Like for me, that part wasn't interesting. It was just like, okay, this is clearly for kids. But as a kid, I thought that was funny. So again, it kind of puts me at a weird place of where I'm thinking this plot is really going to go. I think the parts that they were meant to be interesting were interesting, and the parts that were more aimed for kids definitely did that too. The second essential aspect is attraction. So when it comes to the character of Gromit, I actually really like the character. I think he's very funny, and especially because he doesn't talk, so you have to see his expressions, see his actions in order to see what he's trying to say. And a similar character to that is actually Art the Clown from the Terrifier series. Since he also doesn't talk, you have to kind of just see what he does to understand what he's trying to say. But either way, yeah, Gromit I think is very funny, especially in this movie, the way that he does it. His expressions are not really over-exaggerated, but exaggerated to the point where it makes him funnier, but you still do understand what he's saying. And honestly, it's all the animals have that same exact, now that I think about it, yeah, all the animals have that same exact way of emoting in this movie. So maybe that's what, I mean, that's definitely the part that was the funniest to me. That's the part that got me attracted. I love animals. So all animals in movies that are funny, for me, for some reason, are very funny. So maybe that's why, but I think the movie definitely was attractive in that way, and the fact that it was claymation made it a lot more interesting to me, which also pulled me into the movie. But overall, just the whole concept of this movie has been done 100 times. It's just a werewolf movie, but a rabbit because of the whole vegetable thing. So that part wasn't as attractive, but I'll say the comedy was pretty good. The third essential aspect is theme. The theme that this movie was trying to talk about the entire time was that violence isn't always the answer. The main villain in this movie, the hunter, he wanted to kill the were-rabbit, while Wallace wanted to capture him, wanted to keep him safe, just take him away from eating everyone's vegetables. And That's really what was going on the entire movie. Every time they could have brought it up, they brought it up. So that has to be the theme or the message that the movie is trying to tell the audience. The fourth essential aspect is dialogue. So all the conversations had in this movie felt as real as they could be. I feel like specifically between Wallace and Gromit, obviously Gromit doesn't talk, but Wallace does. So seeing the interactions they have between each other when it comes to dialogue is more interesting because Wallace is talking to Gromit and then Gromit has to try to explain what he's talking about, and you see Wallace try to figure out what he's saying just because of that owner-pet bond that they have. That's where he really understands it. So seeing the relationship they have is really good and definitely pulls you into the characters, and it helps that the dialogue actually feels real in those situations. The fifth essential aspect is acting. So obviously this is claymation. It's not an animation, but it isn't live action. So these are all voice actors. And I feel like everyone honestly had the voice I expected them to for the most part. And everyone did a decent job of actually portraying these characters on screen. However, Peter Sallis, who played Wallace, I think his voice, I don't know why, it sounded identical to what I thought the character would be saying. And he obviously is the main character in this, him and Gromit, since they are the tag team duo trying to take down this were-rabbit. And I think that he definitely did a really good job. His character felt real to me, even though obviously it's animated, it's not live action, but it felt the realest out of all the characters on screen. The sixth essential aspect is cinematography. So this is an interesting one because when it comes to the visuals, claymation, I really like it. It's not for everyone. I know my fiance, for example, she is not all about the claymation and that kind of style of movie making. However, me, I am very situational about it. So there's some claymations I've seen where I just don't think it looks good. It looks sloppy. It doesn't work well. However, this one really works well. I really love this. Obviously, I've watched it as a kid, so maybe that's why it just has some nostalgia to it. But I just really like this style of claymation. You can clearly tell it's clay, which I actually prefer. I've seen some claymations where it obviously out of clay, but they're trying to not make it look like clay. While in this one, it kind of just feels like they knew it looked like it, so they're going to roll with it. It almost felt like the characters knew they were made out of clay. So that kind of visualization for this cinematography, I actually really enjoyed. I think it did really well. And when it came for the emotions, I feel like I was emotionally attached for some part, but anytime something emotional happened in the movie, it didn't really tug at my heartstrings until the end. The ending, they did well with that. I did feel for the character. I didn't cry. I didn't really emote, but I definitely did. It tugged at my heartstrings a little bit. So I have to say, cinematography-wise, they actually did much better than I was expecting. The seventh essential aspect is editing. So this movie is an hour and 25 minutes long, and I think that's perfect. They really understood the assignment here and try to keep it short because it's such a simple fairy tale story. They don't need to make a long, engaging plot. They just kind of have to show the characters, kind of let them have time to develop, get an interesting story in place, and then finish. And that's all they did. That's all they needed to do. So I have to give them props for that, because if this movie was like almost 2 hours long or even an hour 40, it would be too long. It would definitely be too long. There would be no reason to continue on. There'd be so many pointless parts in this movie. But because they kept it short and sweet, they got all the juicy parts and none of the dull bits. The eighth essential aspect is soundtrack. I watched this movie like 3 days ago. I don't remember if there was a soundtrack. If there was, maybe it was good, but I do not remember. The ninth essential aspect is directing. I think it's the director's job to take these previous 8 essential aspects, put them together to make a movie that's worth watching. And the directors of this movie are Steve Box and Nick Park. And Steve Box actually, this is his only movie he's ever directed. He hasn't directed any other movies. While Nick Park has only directed one previously, and it was Chicken Run. So they clearly didn't have so much experience with directing. And for basically first-timers, like Steve Box, this is his first movie, and Nick Park, it was his second. So for basically new-goers for this directing, I think they did a pretty good job. They knew how to have the characters tell their story in a way that, obviously, live action, it's a lot easier to do so, but in claymation, I feel like it is hard. I'm not sure. Maybe it's easier. I think it's harder. So, honestly, for being one of their first movies, I think they did a pretty good job. And the 10th essential aspect is time. I honestly think this movie has stood the test of time because this came out in 2005, so it's 19 years old now, And I still remember it like I watched it yesterday. I mean, it's almost 20 years old, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, because New Year's is a few days away. So, yeah, I have to say that I think it stands the test of time. I feel like it doesn't in many people's eyes, but at least in mine, it definitely has, because it's one of those movies where I will always remember the style, the claymation style that it had. I will always remember that Were-Rabbit. For some reason, it just has been in my head for all these years. So, I have to say, I think it stood the test of time, but let me know what you think in the comments. Now, onto the reviews. So, Rotten Tomatoes critics gave it a 95%, Rotten Tomatoes audience gave it a 79%, and IMDb gave it a 75%. Now, off-rip, 95%, way too high. I have never seen the critics give a rating that's this much higher than an audience, and I honestly don't agree with it. I think that 75 is a pretty good range for it. I'd say like 70, 75, because it does things well, but it doesn't do anything perfect. The only thing I think it does really perfect is the claymation style. Otherwise, it could be improved in many different ways. Obviously, the characters are very lovable. I just don't think it comes across as one of those movies that everyone will always be talking about. And finally, the rankings. So, in 2005, it's going to be second, below The Longest Yard. Now, for me, this wasn't even close. Longest Yard does a lot of things really well. Sure, it has its issues, but I feel like the issues it has, Wallace and Gromit also has. I feel like Wallace and Gromit is just really a middle tier movie where it does things good, but it also does things bad. It's kind of just right there in the middle. While for me, The Longest Yard is above that mark. It is definitely above that mark. I feel like the things it does well, it does really well. It's not really just the baseline. So for me, that wasn't a hard decision. In the 2000s, it's going to be fourth, above The Happening and below X-Men Origins Wolverine. Again, the harder one here was above The Happening. I feel like both movies do their things well. There's many more issues in The Happening when it comes to, I feel like, even acting-wise. The concept, 100% way better. I love the concept in The Happening. That is the only reason that I will go back and rewatch that movie, because it's such a heavy-hearted concept. And Wallace and Gromit, it's just one of those movies that you can sit down, watch it, enjoy it, and then not watch it again for a few years, and then watch it again. And it's just a fun experience, because you're not watching the movie for how good the movie is. You're watching it just to have it be some enjoyment, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So I see myself watching Wallace and Gromit a lot more than The Happening because of how heavy-hearted that concept is. And that's really the only reason I put it above it. And when it comes to X-Men Origins Wolverine, I just feel like, again, Wallace and Gromit has more issues than that movie does. That movie isn't perfect. Obviously, I have hyped it up many times, probably even in my review, just because I am a Marvel lover, and also because X-Men Origins is one of my favorite movies that I have watched from the X-Men, and probably even from Marvel. It's probably because it's one of the first X-Men movies I have even watched, so it kind of has that hook on me. But yeah, no, I definitely think the X-Men Origins Wolverine is better than Wallace and Gromit. I just think the plot is a little more interesting. There's a lot more characters with character development to focus on, and I feel like it just has a bigger emotional impact on you when you're watching that movie than Wallace and Gromit. Now, if you're a kid watching this, then you'd probably put Wallace and Gromit above it, to be honest with you. But for me, X-Men Origins was the clear choice. And in all time, it's going to be 30th, above The First Omen and below Warcraft. Now, this is where I just honestly don't know. It could have been in a lot of different places. I kind of just put it here, just off instinct. This is where I was originally going to put it. Then I thought I'd move it a little low or a little higher. But I think overall, this is the general area it should be. A lot of these movies that I have in this area are close to each other. It's really nitpicking. So nitpicking wise, I just think that it belongs above The First Omen, just because I just found myself enjoying that movie a little more. I think obviously one is claymation, one's live action, so acting here and there is different, but I don't know. I just liked the style and the concept of Wallace and Gromit more than The First Omen. I feel like The First Omen could have been done a lot better. It had an interesting concept, and it had a big idea that it could have gone with. It just didn't. And that's really the one reason why I put it below it. And Wallace and Gromit is below Warcraft because I think that whole world is very interesting. It's the acting is really, really well done in it, especially by the main actor. I forget his name. But overall, that movie it's one of those that I would enjoy more than Wallace and Gromit, just because it has the same kind of entertainment where obviously Wallace and Gromit is funny, but the action pack of Warcraft is really what engages me in it. And the world and everything in both are very different, and I just find myself enjoying the world of Warcraft a lot more than Wallace and Gromit. That's all I have for Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. If you guys enjoyed this review, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and make sure to comment what movie you want me to review next. I'm sorry that I'm doing this while sick. I can feel it. I can feel myself just talking almost nonsense because of my throat, and I bet I'll see it in editing. But either way, I'm sorry that you guys have to deal with my sickness, and especially I'm sorry that I haven't uploaded in 7 days, maybe even 8 days by now. I'm not sure, but it's been a crazy week. So I already said I hope you guys enjoyed this video, so let's just say hope you guys have an amazing night. Peace out.